The protests in Iran are becoming increasingly violent. As a result of clashes between protesters and security forces, at least 20,000 people have died. This information has been disseminated by a number of media outlets. The initial figures were much lower. In particular, Reuters, citing Iranian government sources, reported 2,000 deaths. Later, TV channels began reporting 12,000 deaths, and the figure of 20,000 was announced by the American TV channel CBS News. There is no confirmation of this as of today, but there are video and photo evidences of overcrowded morgues. In particular, one of the images shows at least 400 bodies of the deceased. This footage was reportedly taken somewhere in Tehran. The situation is significantly complicated by the lack of internet access. In Iran, the authorities of this Islamic country, as is known, have completely blocked the possibility for Iranians to communicate with the outside world. The only way to convey information, truthful information about everything that is happening, is through Starlink, which belongs to Elon Musk. As is known, he even stopped charging owners of Starlink terminals, and these very terminals today are almost the only means of delivering information about the horrors that are currently happening in Iran. There was really no doubt that the authorities of Ayatollah would suppress the protest with bloodshed, but hope remained until the very end. There was still hope for intervention by the American administration, especially since Donald Trump himself had spoken about it, and even took a number of symbolic steps. I emphasize steps that were meant to highlight his desire to help the protesters. Trump announced the introduction of additional tariffs against all of Iran's trading partners. He stated that from today, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will have to pay a 25% tariff on all business transactions conducted with the United States. Iran's main foreign trade partners are India, Turkey, and China. Previously, similar measures had also been introduced for Indian and Chinese goods, including for the purchase of oil from Russia. Nevertheless, White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt stated that everything is on the table. President Trump has a number of options regarding this situation, but priority is given to diplomatic measures. Although Axios, citing American officials, reported that Trump is leaning toward airstrikes, this information was also confirmed, among other things, by the so-called pizza index. We're talking about the amount of pizza consumed by Pentagon employees, which increased and even surpassed the levels seen during preparations for previous operations. This indicates absolute determination for an invasion of Venezuela. Back then it was about 0.7, but in the case of Iran it exceeded 1. This gave rise to numerous rumors that military officials had entrenched themselves in the Pentagon and were clearly preparing a military operation against Iran. However, this has not been confirmed, at least as of today. Still, we cannot rule out preparations for such an operation due to a lack of objective information. Axios also reports that the White House administration believes that airstrikes against Iran could have the opposite effect. And although Trump stated that Tehran has crossed all red lines, but he also did not rule out the possibility of a diplomatic solution. Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince of Iran, who is now a frequent guest on all major US television channels, has called on Trump to intervene as soon as possible in order to bring about the fall of the regime. Ayatollah. It also became known that just a few days ago, Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, secretly met with Reza Pahlavi. This is the first such high-level meeting of its kind. This was also reported by Axios, citing high-ranking American officials. Israel has provided US intelligence with data indicating that the number of casualties is at least 5,000 people. The final numbers will obviously be much higher. Pahlavi has become a frequent guest on major American TV channels, including conservative ones. He has started to be quoted very widely. However, for a long time, the White House ignored Pahlavi's presence and considered him an insignificant figure from the past, especially since he fled Iran almost 50 years ago in the late 1970s. Later, Trump and his advisors were impressed by videos from Iran showing protesters chanting Reza's name and called for him to return to Iran. This shifted the balance of power and, let's say, changed Trump and his advisors' attitude toward Pahlavi's candidacy. And because of this, Trump gave Steve Witkoff the appropriate order to arrange a meeting. However, the content of this meeting and any agreements reached remain unknown. And it is obvious that without American intervention to suppress the bloody protests in Iran, most likely the regime will succeed in quelling them. The protest is drenched in blood with even more casualties. They will not stop at tens of thousands killed. There is a lot of information being reported, including by television channels. Iranian enforcers are conducting raids, including at both private and state hospitals throughout Iran, demanding that medical workers provide the addresses and names of the injured, including those who have already been discharged from the hospitals. Their further fate is quite grim. According to journalist reports, these people are either found and immediately killed by the enforcers, or they are taken away to unknown locations, tortured, and also killed. CBS, however, claims that it cannot independently verify the number of those killed. Meanwhile, the opposition TV channel Iran International cites a figure of 12,000 dead. So once again, I repeat, we are seeing a sharp increase in the number of deaths. Those killed during these protests, which have been raging since January 8th. The reason I remind you was economic demands and the fall of the national currency. Meanwhile, the clashes are becoming more and more violent. CBS writes that the channel has obtained video footage. 400 dead Iranians who were literally piled up in a morgue in the suburbs of Tehran. Forensic medical experts are recording injuries of varying severity on the bodies of the deceased, including gunshot wounds. Lacerations were apparently caused by shrapnel wounds, while others suffered severe injuries, including bodies crushed by armored vehicles or run over and killed by security forces' cars. It is reported that a lot of such videos are appearing, but once again, I repeat, without intervention. And for the Americans, most likely the protest is headed for defeat, and the official authorities in Tehran will manage to drown this protest in blood. All of this combined with the fact that such protests occur in Iran with enviable regularity. The last time there were such mass protests was in 2022. Back then it was a protest by Iranian women. Now, all of this will essentially lead to an internal civil war. As a result, a huge number of Iranians will be forced to emigrate, simply having to flee. It is also possible that the regime will lose control over part of the cities for some time, but eventually will regain it once again. I repeat, using security forces, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and specially recruited militant squads, which are also used and are not under any protective control. These are essentially gangs that now operate almost independently, killing, robbing, and engaging in looting. There are also numerous reports of robberies committed by these groups. Donald Trump offers no specifics, only promises. At this point, he's not providing any concrete details. Here is one of his latest posts on this topic. He called on Iranians to seize government institutions, quoting Iranian patriots. Keep protesting, seize your institutions, remember the names of the murderers and rapists. They will pay a heavy price for this. I have cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killings of protesters stop. Help is already on the way. Let's make Iran great again. However, Trump does not specify what kind of help he means in this case. Meanwhile, once again, I repeat, the situation is becoming extremely dramatic, and if there is no turning point for the regime in the coming days, things could get even worse. It is already clear that the Ayatollahs are facing defeat. This is an uprising. It's safe to say that openly now. This is an uprising, an open killing of peaceful protesters who initially came out with peaceful economic demands, but the criminal authorities in Tehran forced them to radicalize. Naturally, if this scenario plays out, if the uprising is suppressed, Russia and China, Iran's key allies, will benefit. However, judging by everything, the story will certainly not end there. This will not destroy the protest movement itself. On the contrary, these contradictions will be driven underground, making the next wave of protest even more explosive. In short, the situation for the regime in Tehran will continue to develop in the future. The next protest could be even more dramatic, possibly involving not just civilians, but also broader segments of the population, including the military, since we understand that as a result of the current uprising, there will be grievances, including against the security forces and the military, because they did not act radically enough towards Tehran. At the initial stage, and of course, given the specifics of the East, blood feuds are still very much a reality. Quite a few security officers have already been killed. Of course, not as many as civilians, that's clear. But revenge, vendetta against war criminals, those who gave and carried out these orders, can stretch on for many, many years and even decades. We know that the East is not a region where such crimes are forgotten by the relatives of the victims, all the more so because among them there are many wealthy people who are capable of paying for any operation and ordering the elimination of any security officer in the future.